Okay guys, so welcome to a homeschool roundtable. We definitely want to preface this by saying in no way do we think we are professionals or we have some heightened understanding of educating from home that you do not. We are 5 moms from different backgrounds. We homeschool in different ways. Our children are different ages. We use different methods. But we have had to untangle the web of what homeschooling is, what it looks like, and we kind of just wanted to organize that for all of you who are trying to make decisions right now and may just feel really overwhelmed and confused. We figured to sit down with 5 moms over some coffee and some tea who have done this before, who have walked this road and have navigated already, maybe enlightening, encouraging, inspiring. We have some wonderful helpers behind the camera today. You may hear them speak up occasionally, trying to keep us on target. We have different points we want to make sure we hit, but for the most part, this will be an organic conversation and we'll just kind of let it unfold. So we will introduce ourselves and we'll start with Alicia.
Hi, my name is Alicia Marketel. My husband is a pastor here in Louisiana, and we have 4 children. Our eldest 13-year-old twins and a boy and a girl, and then I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter, and we've been homeschooling since the twins were about 4, so kindergarten.
Hi, I'm Annie Hammonds. I have 4 girls, 8, 5, 4, and a 2-year-old. We have always homeschooled. My husband and I were both in the public school system, but I have 2 older sisters who have like 15 kids together. And they've also always homeschooled, so it seemed kind of natural for me.
So my story is a lot like Annie's. My name is Cassandra Garbarino. My husband and I have 4 boys. They are 9, I told them I was going to forget, 9, 7, 4, and almost 2. My husband and I also both have education backgrounds, and my husband is actually still currently works for the public school system. And we also have siblings who homeschool, and so that was a light that God shone in our lives early on, and we've been doing this from the start, and had really great people just ahead of us to guide us and teach us how to go about this and fit it into our lives well.
My name's Amber. I have 3 children. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Homeschooling was, I guess, not really something I imagined going through school. My goal was to always be a nurse practitioner and to have this big career, and then I had a baby. I got pregnant on our honeymoon and had a baby 9 months later, so that all changed, and motherhood just kind of took over my entire life. And so our oldest went to pre-K at a private Christian school. Wonderful experience, but always felt discontent inside. And I always thought it would get better when I would drop her off, and it didn't. And so really started to consider homeschooling a little more. And Cassandra segued me into it. And I haven't looked back yet. So that's me.
Awesome. I'm Sarah Ash. We have 5 kids. I have 4 boys, and they are 17, 15, 11, 9, and a little girl who's 6. We started this homeschool journey quite a few years back. The oldest was in school at a Montessori school. That was kind of our school of choice. And probably halfway through the year, we realized like this was just not for him. So he's in pre-K, and I had no intention of homeschooling. And actually, the teacher was kind of offered that maybe I should keep him at home, which blew my mind because I was paying this private school. So,
You don't want me?
I was ready to send the next one on to school and carry that on and have my free day. So, we started the journey not knowing any homeschoolers. It was totally just a step of faith, and hey, we haven't looked back since either. I hadn't sent them back, so I think we're doing all right.
Alicia, people might wonder about where you come from because your accent's a little different than ours. Do you want to tell them where you're from?
Well, I'm originally from South Africa. I came when I was 21. And been here. Now I'm going to tell my age if I say I've been here a very long time. It's kind of morphed. You can hear that I sound closer to you guys than I did before.
A little bit.
A little bit. It's still lovely.
You've learned some of the lingo, but you still have that sweet accent.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
She's a wealth of knowledge. Okay, so we want to unwrap homeschooling and just give you a zoomed out vision about what it is, because so many of you, like us, are stuck in your own tiny space, possibly backed into a corner, having to make a decision that you did not think you would have to make or want to have to make right now. And some of you may be feeling like this is new oxygen. This is something that you've been considering for years and you finally have the push to do it. No matter what has put you in the scenario where you're at now, we want to zoom out for you and give you a view of what that looks like, because there's a lot more to it than the worry and the angst and the sold out curriculums and everything you might be feeling right now.
Right.
So homeschooling is as old as humanity. Home education is not anything new. Obviously there was a shift. The Industrial Revolution kind of shifted a lot in society, and we shifted into structured public school systems, which was great for, in certain aspects, in certain regards, to get education where it wasn't available before. And it pretty much remained that way once public education came about until the 1970s, when there was an educator. His name was John Holt, and he had very radical ideas about reforming homeschool and what that looked like. If you're interested and you like reading different theologies of things, you should go read his writings, and you'll get a better understanding about what he believed needed to change and the problems that he saw that were arising from the type of standard, almost like assembly line education that had evolved at that point.
Is there one book on that?
There's 8.
Yeah. Oh,
He has 8 books that are currently in publication. He wrote 10 and 2 aren't in publication anymore, but first book's got a few dollars of mine this week, so I'll be getting those.
He's
two
incredible.
of them.
He's incredible. And he was speaking so radically. Obviously, he encountered a lot of resistance in that time. But in the 1970s, after he started speaking out about that, that's when the movement to homeschool really started to shift back. And then our light disappeared. And then in 1993 was when homeschool became legalized in all of the states of the United States. And so, yeah, it's kind of new.
That was that recent.
Yeah, and it's important to mention too that the people who started out with this process in the 70s, they had so much resistance, and they were so looked down upon for removing their kids. I mean, we have it so easy now compared. They didn't have curriculum, they didn't have access to anything. They just had to
Be brave.
be brave and forge ahead, you know.
Definitely. His whole thing was he did not want to separate children from the world in which they lived to learn. He thought that it was an ignorant way to try to educate children, completely separating them. He really believed in the living type of education.
But taking your child to the bank, they're going to learn more about math, having an interaction with somebody who's a professional in it than they are going to sitting down and doing a worksheet. So he was really about just living your life with your family, with your children, and letting them learn that way.
He did this really poignant interview with this woman in her backyard with her children, and she asked him what reform she thought he could see in a school system that would change his mind about it. And he said, "I'm not saying that homeschool is the answer to the badness of a public school. I'm saying no matter what your home looks like, it can be a broken home, it can look very atypical. It's 2020. The modern family looks very different all over the United States. And so it doesn't matter what your home looks like. The home is the nucleus. It's the core of a child. Everything spans outward from home. And so it's only natural that's where their learning would take place. And so he was saying school should only ever, the public school should only have ever been a supplement to that. Just like summer camp or baseball or all of any extracurricular is a supplement to the home. School should have been a supplement to the home, and learning still has to take place in the family. And so you kind of get on the track where you think, people are like, well, what if like my family, we don't have good communication, or we don't function like a family, quote unquote, should, or we don't have those healthy relationships. Well, then obviously schooling at home would be very difficult, you know?
Right.
Alicia and I have talked about this so many times. Like, if you feel broken in your concept of motherhood, if you feel broken in your concept of having a joy for life and learning on your own, we won't pretend like homeschool is going to be easy for you. Those things have to change and get in alignment. Whether you're a single mom, you know, whether you are remarried and homeschooling stepchildren, whatever that looks like for you, there is alignment that has to take place. And homeschooling may not fix that in a backward sort of way, but it can be the bridge to get you there, you know? So I think that is like a misconception people might have, that
Definitely.
it would have to fix everything.
Or
Okay.
another misconception, just like not being educated enough. You know, that was kind of for me and for my husband. You know, I didn't have a teaching degree. What? How can you be a teacher and teach these kids if you don't have a teaching degree? That was a big one. So I feel like through this, it really helped me to learn along with the kids, be prepared above searching out. I was always researching. And then I thought, but if I just give them what I desire for them is just to have a joy of learning. I don't need an education surpassing just to be a mom.
Well, and yeah, one thing Alicia said, you know, we started when my children were 4. I mean, we started when they were coming out, you know, I mean,
It's just a natural progression.
as a mother, we're there to teach them and guide them, and so God already gave us that ability and that role in their life, and so why then at 4 or 5 do I have to hand them off to say somebody else is going to take control of this for me when He's already given us those gifts and those abilities without, you know, you don't need an education for that.
John Holt said something as well where somebody, you know, a common question he would get from people was, how can I teach my children for 6 hours a day? And he said, who is teaching your children for 6 hours a day?
True.
You know,
That's true.
They're not getting 6 hours of education. There's a lot of time that is spent in between classes, teaching large groups of children. When you are in a small one-room schoolroom with your children, it's not 6 hours of one-on-one educating your children.
Right.
And then another question was, well, how am I going to teach my children chemistry? You know, I barely even got through high school, or I didn't even finish high school. And he said, there's people that can teach your children
That's
chemistry.
right.
You know?
That's right.
Like, do what you can and hire out the rest. Find
That's
people that you hate nature, you don't want to talk about bugs, your children love it. There's a mom somewhere who wants to talk to your kids about bugs. It's about community too, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't, and he actually did say too, sometimes an education degree, do not take offense to this, anybody with an education degree, is more difficult because you're having to unlearn everything you were taught in order to teach your children at home.
Right.
Teaching children the alphabet and colors.
For me, the first year of homeschooling, I was just having to unlearn public school because I was comparing myself to public school. I just had to learn to like relax.
And that's one thing I'm going to address later on, but there is a deschooling process.
Right.
And so if your kids, I mean, none of us had kids that went to school for a long period of time, but if your kids did go to school, there's a process and a step back and a relearning that the kids have to do too. So it's not just those of us who might have education degrees to unlearn pedagogy, but the kids need to unlearn that too.
And we were created to have joy in learning, to want to learn. That may have shifted a bit just with the way society has shifted, but that is still part of our innermost being, that desire to learn,
That's right.
the ability to learn, and the joy in doing so. And you're just reharnessing that as parents. And so once you understand that, and you understand that part of homeschooling, it becomes very confusing to wonder why people think you cannot obtain that at home. Because it's there, it's innate, it's in your children. you will learn alongside your children constantly.
So much.
Oh,
Already.
I mean, by third grade, I didn't
Yeah.
know anything. By the time we got to third grade, I didn't remember.
Yeah.
I relearned everything.
History.
And it has been amazing.
Oh, so much history that I did not
It
know.
has been amazing. It's like things like clicked for the first time in how many years? I'm like, oh, this is why this works. And my children just, I mean, they're so lucky to be able to go through this process
Right.
and understand it so easily. Yeah.
But the beauty in that is it doesn't become a separation. You learn the best through so I use this quote all the time, but we don't learn through our experiences, we learn through hindsight.
Mhm.
And it's the reflection on that. And so we are teaching our children. And so we get to constantly make that part of our life. You're living the education of your children, and not in a weird way that you make your children walk around like reciting facts in the grocery store, but you're able to show them how this relates to life. And they can reflect on that constantly.
Yeah.
And in that, like you pointing out those similarities, they're reflecting on that lesson, and that's where that is being solidified in them. And then they're able to repeat it and teach people,
I will be touching on this in a little bit as well when we talk about classical education, but the kids go through phases, and in certain phases they learn differently. And especially as their mother, you know your child, and you are constantly on their level with them as they're learning, and which makes it such a beautiful moment when they get it, and it's like aha. And I think to me that's been the most wonderful part of homeschooling is like just to watch them go from phase to phase and learn the same information but on a different level, and it becomes their own. And it like we just had a moment in our family as my kids are now going into grade 8, and my husband was preparing his sermon. He came home and he was talking about his studies, and they were like, but Herodotus was like da, 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 da. And it was like I was just sitting back and going, this is awesome. So it's just watching them go through their phases and understanding where they're at, imparting the knowledge. I mean, it's amazing. It really is.
Definitely. So we talked about a couple misconceptions. I think you'd be good at this one. I get told a lot, I do not have patience to homeschool.
Oh yeah, okay, so let's talk about grace upon grace.
Yes.
All right, I am not a patient person by nature.
I was. Is anybody
I don't know, I mean some
I
people
was
might
before the
be,
kids,
but
then
yeah, I mean it's just, there are times where I have to say, okay, last night, all right? Doing research because I knew Amber would be uber prepared for this, so I had to be extra prepared and make notes. And so I was trying to, have my quiet time, do my thing. I set them up with a show, but that only lasts for 3 minutes at my house. So the baby's in my lap, playing with my laptop while I'm trying to read, and I'm like,
I hate Amber right now.
well, why can't you take care of your brother? I had to think, okay, they've had a long day today. We had somebody come to the house. They did their schoolwork. They got mud everywhere from outside in my kitchen, in my living room, and in my bathroom. But they're tired. It's not their job. I chose to have these children. They didn't choose to have siblings. They're tired too. It's not their responsibility to be taking care of him. And so I just had to say, you know what? This can wait till they're in bed. We go to bed early at our house, so this will wait, and it's okay. But that does not come naturally to me, and I have to remind myself, what's my priority here?
Right.
I'm also studying right now. I'm in school, and so I have to make sure that they know that they're my priority, and that those things can wait.
Full-time
and
nursing student,
Not at the very moment, but yeah, it's coming.
by the way.
Right.
If you wonder how it's going to fit into
It fits, yeah. And so that's another thing. You work. I've
That's right.
worked the whole time that I've homeschooled. I worked
Can
2
do it
days a
while
week at the
working.
church, and so they came with me, and we made our organization portable. And they got a lot of work done even when I was working. So it can happen, and I don't get up at the crack of dawn, but you get it in before school.
You get it in, but if you had 5 hours to get dressed and ready, or you had 30 minutes,
Yeah.
you can get ready in that 30 minutes. It's kind of the same. This is the time frame we have, so we have to get it done. When we had all day, and it was just so leisurely, and we just loved it. Schooling took all day. Our school took all day, and sometimes we still weren't finished. But when the time, like for a working mom, you know, you might have only this day, not tomorrow, or the hours are different. It's amazing what you can get done in that time.
And it's good for them. They learn. I know my children have learned so much structure from us. Look, math has to be done by 11, because if you're not done with math by 11, then IEW is not going to be done by lunch, and then you're behind. You know, and not that we're rushing them all the time, but they can get it done by 11. It's not like I set an unrealistic expectation.
Right.
It can be done by that time. It's just how much time are you looking out the window and how much time is your pencil moving on your paper.
Right.
By the way, IEW is a curriculum.
Yeah, we'll get there. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think it's really important too to understand the skill level of a child. So you have to have expectations that are realistic around the age of your child, the skill set of your child. Every child's different.
And that particular child, right.
But it's also good to teach them. So I run a business from home, and I don't have 3 hours to sit down and answer emails, you know, or create graphics or create outlines for classes or whatnot. And so when I sit down and I have 20 minutes and I set a timer, I have to get things done in that 20 minutes.
Right.
And that's a skill that you learn through childhood. You have to stay on task. You need to focus. And you flow with your child. When are they energetic the most, you know? And that's kind of,
right.
We'll talk about that in Charlotte Mason a little bit, but there's that mindset of what you engage at what times during the day, but you learn your children. And that's it, like, you are creating an education for your children based on who they are, and you're challenging them. So it's not like there's no expectations, they're never going to be challenged, they're going to get participation awards for everything. It's not like that, but you're also not shoving them in a box where they are not able to thrive.
When go ahead, Alicia, go ahead.
They're not, homeschooling isn't always sitting at a desk and learning.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have learned that reading can happen in the vehicle as we're driving from point A to point B, or science is a nature study, or that we go on a hike with all our friends. And homeschooling is not socially restrictive.
No, it's not.
Oh, that's such a great point. I think, you know, people, that was always a red flag. The first thing they would ask me was, so how are you socializing them? What?
Yeah. Like, how are we trying to focus and not
I'm trying to stay home today. You know, there's a lot of fun things that we've done and traveled here and there for field trips and learning the opportunities of just learning, or having a friend that's like, hey, so we're gonna do a writing class. Oh, good.
We'll be there.
You'll be there.
Can I make room? And that's something too, is people. I did want to say about the not being patient. Everybody that I've spoken to, I've told them, obviously I believe in God, and so that's the spiritual leader in my life. But my advice is always that God never calls the equipped; He equips the called. And so you don't have patience. I don't have patience. I am a broken failure of a human being. But I was called to educate my children. It brings me joy. I know it in my gut. And so He equips me every day. And I have to lean on Him for that. And
obviously, when you feel like it's failing, you have to, that's your humanness coming in. You need to draw back.
And lean on someone that you can trust. There's been many instances where I've reached out to Annie and said, like, I'm failing, you know? And it's not like in a narcissistic, tell me I don't deserve this sort of way. It's like, help me reassess, you know? And your spouse can be great for that too, if they're in the picture and if they're supportive. I get that's always not the case, but there is someone you need to find in your life that can help you with that.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Community's huge.
But when we have those really bad days, I usually just close the book and go to the next day or into the afternoon, and we just go outside or we leave the house.
That's part of knowing your kids. Like, when they're done and you're done and it's done, then there's no point in trying to butt heads the rest of the day. And that's definitely true in my house.
And you're teaching them to be a kind and patient human being in doing that, because you're showing them what grace looks like.
Yeah.
So what's it look like to educate children of different ages in the same household?
Okay, so we have a wide range. We have 2 high schoolers, 2 middle schoolers, and kindergarten. Should be in first grade. Now it's beautiful. Okay, I'm kind of in a good season right now.
You did the work.
All right. So really, right now is my 2 older boys who were severely dyslexic. Okay, but thrived in math. I mean, they've been teaching me math all these years. They were just really, really good in it. And now I'm reaping the rewards of that as they're helping teach math to the younger boys. So where I'm showing them, and this is what you have to do today right here, and he's like, you know, I can read the directions and kind of put him on task, but my older boys are actually explaining it well. So not only have I taught the older boys, but now they're teaching, they're able to teach.
Yes.
Which
they've
solidifies it even more for you when you're teaching
totally.
someone.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we
It's
have,
very rhetorical.
you know, trudged through fractions and all of the hard stuff, and now that they're able to teach it to their younger brothers is probably the best thing where I'm like, so that worked out.
I remember you told me one time that Maddie like read something to you and you were like, wow, who taught you to read?
Yeah. That was Carson. That was Carson.
I had the same experience. So a couple weeks ago, I was working with Todd Anthony spelling his name. And so my oldest is a girl, middle's a boy. The girl, just a very precocious child, loves to learn, absorbs. My little boy is very much a little boy. You know, I had to buy an alphabet slapjack game so he could literally physically hit the letters to make him excited about the alphabet.
Right.
But I'm working with him and his name. His name is Todd Anthony.
It's very long.
All the first name.
We could have stuck with TA. And made it
I know,
really
that's
easy.
what he can spell. So we're like, okay, let's work with one word at a time, like Todd, we'll work with Todd. So I'm spelling his name with him, and my 3-year-old walks up, and she spells her name for me. She's like, listen to my name, and she spells it. And I was like, who taught you to spell your name? How do you taught her?
That's right.
Yeah.
So they
It's-
are absorbing from the
Yes.
older ones all the time.
Definitely. What was the most difficult? Obviously, you had to shift there was a pivot every year. Multiple times a year, I'm sure. But what was is there any...
I tell you what brought us all together every time is the boys like to be outdoors, and so we did nature hikes, and we would find things. Well, I'm sorry, they would find things in nature outside, which I was not fond of at first, and bring home. We found little bones, like little animal bones.
Yeah.
They brought that home. I was not fond of this at first, but just like letting them do things like that, and it involved everyone, and so there wasn't really a level there. It was kind of like, oh, I understand this one schoolroom, this one, where they're all learning just at different things. So where the boys were researching what animal, this was a mouse, all right. And then the younger boys were just like, oh wow, that's what the mouse skull looks like, right? And then my daughter wanted to get a pet mouse, so the learning was happening all over. But I think that being outside in nature studies and hikes, and that really brought them all together.
So finding something to bond over.
Yes, definitely.
Which is what some curriculums are doing now. They're creating family styles, history, and different things. But, so I can imagine, because I've done it on a smaller scale with our, the very limited amount of years we've been doing this, but every year it changes, but I have to find, what does Hattie need to do by herself? Like, what independent stuff does she need to work on?
All right.
And then you just have to find the flow of that, and not so much a schedule like it's 7:30. It's 7:30.
Right.
It's more like a rhythm.
It's
like,
a
okay,
rhythm.
you're doing this.
That's the best way to put it. It is totally a rhythm.
So now I'm going to give your brother my undivided attention, and then he'll move on to a tanagram, a block or something, and then I'll move back to you. So it's like a
Definitely.
constantly shifting rhythm, I'd assume.
It
that what
is
it looks
definitely like that, and I think starting, my older ones are awake first, right? And so they know what is for the day, what they're supposed to do. But starting with the younger ones and spending time from the younger on up really helped, because they have such a short attention span. So starting with my youngest, just doing her little, maybe a worksheet here, reading her story, and giving her, I'd love to make like a box, a theme box that went with her books, and kind of brought that all in, and then allow her to play. right? So like her cup is filled so that when I move on to the next one to help, she's not there begging for the attention of that. Like I filled her little cup and then I would move on. And then just, showing patience and grace, and maybe someone needed a little more help. And so I'm like, hey, well, let's all sit together and help them, right? They're going to catch something. The younger one's going to catch something from helping the next one.
And it's a training
That's
process.
been a train for me, patience,
Grace.
grace. But I don't know if you want to talk about this with the dyslexia now, or we can
Go for it. I mean, people have so many questions about special needs. Like, we don't have standard children. Typical,
Right.
What is a typical child? They're, they're made in the image of God, and they're created the way He chose to create them.
That is right. So, starting on this journey that I was not cut out for, first off, and then to throw that in the mix, I had the boys tested. They just weren't quite catching on to reading and the phonics part, and I just couldn't grasp, like, what am I doing wrong here? We had them tested dyslexic and severely dyslexic with the dysgraphia. I mean, you can have all the labels, I guess, there. And one of the things that really spoke to my heart, because I was such out of clue. Now there's so many great resources, and there's like the reading center we have now that they help with dyslexia, but we didn't have anything available there. So I just decided, my husband and I, to not label them and give them these labels, and just to live that out as seamless as I could without it burdening them or making them feel like there's something wrong with them. And so I read books, y'all. I read directions up till probably 4th grade. I was still reading math problems that, like I said, they were great at math and could do the problems, but
you
the
had to
word
read it.
problems, I needed to read that. And we really worked through that until only very recently, in the past 2 years. So I guess right before high school, I told the oldest two, that they were dyslexic. They had no idea all of these years.
Reading giant novels.
And they love to read now. I mean, most of what they do is just they're reading books, and they can write papers now. And thankfully, there's still autocorrect on the phone for him later. And it was just such a good thing that happened, that we didn't harp on it or point out where they struggled so much. I would just praise how good they were in math. Again, I was just so like, you're so good in this, and kept reading until now that, they love to read.
We touched on this, but keeping that love of learning. So like my oldest also struggled with reading, and his younger brother does not struggle with reading. And so, he knew that he was not on the same level as Rowan, and so he felt that, and that honestly lit a little bit of a fire under him. But everyone kept telling me, when they turn 9, when they turn 9, when they turn 9. I'm not lying to you. Christmas 8.5, all of a sudden he could read. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we were at my mother-in-law's house, and he was watching YouTube videos, which is another conversation. But she said, Cassandra, he read Combine. And I was like, I know. But she hadn't. She said, last time I was listening to him try to sound something out, he couldn't blend. He knew the sounds, but he could not make it into a word. And so, we were about to start doing some testing and had done some online testing, but, they in their own timing. Because I know if he was in a different setting and hadn't had the patience that God graced me with, to keep going over those same phonics 100 times and keep reading the same story. Like, we read the Cat Hat book, yesterday, and today we're just starting from scratch.
Right.
And I know Amber's kind of going through some of this too right now. But you're just like, why did we do yesterday if we're going to do it again today?
Right.
But just not saying it and keep going, because it's going to come. And if you keep loving it and you keep reading aloud, different people have different struggles, and he was obviously mild, if on any kind of spectrum, but you just have to keep going and keep walking and keep trudging, and then find what works, right?
Yeah, and my daughter's also dyslexic, and on top of that, once she's turned about 8 years old, she started developing vision issues and had migraines. at least 2 to 3 a week. And it was so debilitating to her. We didn't know how we were going to even get through school. But as we continued with just life, I would read to her. At one point, her headaches were so bad that she couldn't sit. She would just sit in the dark room, and we didn't think any schoolwork was going to happen. But I would read to her, and we'd talk about it. I'd ask her questions. She'd shoot the answers right back at me. We did math the same way. I would sit and try and write with her to keep up with her. I could not keep up with my child. She literally spits the answer out first, and then we have to work it back to understand how she got there and is it the correct method? Did she approach it in the right way? And if she had been in a classroom, she would have just fallen through the cracks. But definitely for me, by God's grace, God had allowed us to do a lot of reading, to talk to a lot of people, and to be okay. I mean, she was 10 years old, and she's like, Mommy, why can't I do this? And I was like, baby, you have dyslexia. And I wasn't going to tell her either, but she just came right out and asked. And I said, but that doesn't define you. It just means you learn differently. And that's okay. Right. And that's okay. You are unique, and God has gifted you, and He has a very specific mission and calling on your life. And you are going to be a beautiful tool in His hands. And we're just going to learn differently. That's all.
That's right.
She keeps up with her twin brother, and she gives him a run for his money academically. So don't think that my child has disabilities. They cannot cope. And we have to do a particular curriculum. Your child is beautiful and wonderful and uniquely made.
Yes.
And I hear that a lot, like, my 6-year-old's not reading. I can't teach them to read. I mean, how old was Gavin when he read?
11. So he read, I remember it was an Imagination Station book. He read the first one he was reading out loud. I bought the whole series. I cried too. I mean,
what do you want? What book do you want? You name it.
Right.
I'll buy the library.
So it was just one of those, we just all remember.
Delayed gratification.
Yes. And then, going back to, we're going to talk about curriculum, but not right now, but there's so many helpful resources now, so many that we didn't have back then. So at around that age, 10, 11, when things were coming out, that's still 6-7 years ago, and we got a hand on that. I wish we could have started with that. So I took some of that curriculum and just started with my other children right away, realizing this was a great way for them to learn to read. But who's to say? Who's just reading out loud and having that joy help them tenfold.
Okay, last question, common question people have before we move on to the curriculums. I've heard a lot of people say, we just can't afford it. Or we're not wealthy enough to homeschool. Not sure where that misnomer comes from.
No.
Can I jump in here?
Go for it.
So when our children were born, it was quite by accident. We were planning to go to grad school, and we had this whole plan, And shortly after we were married, I had to go off the pill, so we had to devise a different way to approach this whole thing. And it didn't work out. And we didn't just have one. We were actually sitting there, and the doctor says, "Oh, I see one baby and another baby," and it was just silence. We were just in shock. My husband was making $18,000 a year at that point, and I was going through immigration. I was not allowed to work, and so that's how we started out. By the time the children were ready to go to start school, my husband was in grad school. We were making $0 here and in debt, and it was just so overwhelming. But God's timing is always so perfect. I came across a book, Well Trained Mind, and in the book she actually talks about not having enough finances. You have a library and books are free, and learning doesn't mean worksheets.
Right.
And so, with less than $20,000 for a family of 4, we were able to start homeschooling. Paper, pencils, a library book, It's doable. It really is
Definitely.
doable.
There's so many curriculums, and I know a common theme that I hear is what I want is sold out. There's so many curriculums that are available for download. You download it, you print it as you go. People are, wanting certain math manipulatives. Cassandra and I were talking about this just now.
There's memes in the cupboard.
I have expensive manipulatives that I usually push aside because my children want black beans.
So we were just doing multiplication with my 7-year-old, and he was using crayons, laying his crayons out. Okay, I have this row of 7. If I count it 4 times, how many? So, they're not going to go get the manipulative that's in the cabinet. They're going to use what's on the table in front of them.
Yes.
He was using his crayons for another project. So
Don't waste your money on
Don't waste your money on a ton of stuff.
Also,
because you have to store the stuff.
there are people who have walked this road already who have old workbooks that
Yes.
you can easily recreate if you need. It's just, it doesn't have to be astronomically expensive.
No, and you could be buying a book for 25 cents at a homeschool co-op when people are getting rid of their stuff, or eBay, or even Amazon has used thrift books.
Thrift books is great,
thrift
but
books.
if you are looking for a specific curriculum and you're like, this is the one that I know is going to work for my family, it probably won't. But, so don't spend a lot of money on it because it's not worth it. But Facebook groups, there are buy-sell groups for every curriculum under the sun, and someone is getting rid of your level. Search it out. It might have a frayed edge. Our Saxon books that we have right now, another family, it has someone's cursive handwriting on the front. It's not our last name, but it's still good. And so, being able to utilize, one, it's resourceful, but two, it's a lot cheaper. So definitely seek out used books.
Normally when people are on tighter budgets, they are resourceful. And so where there's a will, there's a way. Like, it's absolutely doable.
And another thing is so I've known that we wanted to do a specific curriculum for our son for writing, and so we specifically saved for that curriculum for writing, and it's an investment, so all of our children will use it. So we knew we were going to have to lay down this money, at this point, but we knew that 9 years old was coming. That's when we wanted to start it, and so we specifically saved for that curriculum.
Yes.
And you can use it for the one.
And then it's an investment. It's going to be used for 4+ kids. So.
And there may be some real flexibility that has to happen this year, especially with shortages of things. But that's a great concept. Is factor this into your family budget. And come next year, you won't be in the same position. You'll have the money there you purchased your supplies back in March, thankfully, before all of this happened.
Me too.
Me
So-
too.
And school doesn't have to start August 3rd.
No.
Exactly.
School can start after Labor Day, or at Christmas,
Right.
or in January.
Use your libraries.
Yes.
There's also
library.
online.
Yes, huge advocate for libraries.
Definitely.
Okay, so where do you begin with homeschooling? So, number 1, you need to figure out your state's requirements for homeschooling. The easiest way to do this, there is a website called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. You can find that at www.hslda.org. And there's a legal section there, and there's a nice, pretty graphic of the United States of America. You choose on your state, and it tells you exactly what to do. What the requirements are, if you need to register your homeschool. It's not some cut and dry, you're going to fail at this thing. There's lots of flexibility to it. I also would encourage you, number 2, connect with other homeschoolers
Definitely.
in your area. There are Facebook groups. If you're not on Facebook, use word of mouth. If you want to do this, you will find a way. If you're shy, it's okay. Be bold, step outside of your comfort zone, ask questions to people that you know homeschool. If you're part of a church community or any type of community, ask questions there, use those resources, and create gatherings, sit and have coffee together and let your children play and just bounce ideas off of one another. And number 3, understand the methods of educating your children before you choose your curriculum, and decide on what method you're going to use, and do not cement your feet in there.
Yes.
Be prepared to pivot and shift, but Also, take the time to educate yourself, which we're about to lay it out for you in an organized manner, because there are at least 7 different main methods of education. You need to decide what works for you and your family, and you need to understand each of them so that you can make that decision with clarity. And that's where the overwhelm's coming from, is the lack of understanding.
And there's so much. Like there's, in each of these little subgroups that we're going to talk about, I mean, I'm looking at a chart that has, 6, 7 different curriculums for one specific kind. So really, it takes research, and it does take time and prayer and that understanding. So this will be a great tool.
And if you feel like a certain curriculum is speaking to you, or a certain method is speaking to you, I encourage you to go research that a little more. But we'll point out the main ideas to you, and kind of the determining factor that might make you say, this is a really good option for my family, or this is absolutely not in the wheelhouse of what we need to do.
And often, when you look at something online, you don't know what it looks like in paper, like having the book in front of you. So just get on one of those homeschool groups and say, does anybody use this curriculum? I really want to see what it looks like. And I promise you there'll be a mother who will jump and say, I'm close to you.
Yes, and I loved to actually flip through that. So I had to look at that and have my hands on it. And so I would go to like Mordell's, which is a store that has a lot of the curriculum there, just to flip through it. And online it looks completely different. That was helpful for me to go like, oh, okay, this seems doable, or like, oh my, that is way too much here.
Right.
We'll just put
You
that
can
back.
also group search in all the Facebook groups, and people review them in there. And I read all over Kathy Duffy's website.
Yes.
She reviews a lot of curriculums too.
She's very
That's
helpful.
I
very
think
helpful.
Kathy Duffy is the one where I took that quiz that kind of helps you to see, which type or which kind of
Kathy Duffy.
Kathy Duffy.
With a C.
Is it the Duffy Review? No.
Like her 100 top picks that have that book.
And you can actually click on the curriculum, and it's hyperlinked, and she also explains everything very detailed. So she's definitely.
I love
And I
a
think
good
that's where
resource.
people are feeling really overwhelmed right now, is
Yes.
all the different
There's so
examples.
much.
So at least if you can get a little more concise picture of
You
what
can
you want
always
to do.
switch curriculums too. You don't have to be
Yes.
using that one for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right.
And I did that. I bought a curriculum, used it for a year, realized my children are not worksheet people, and I was able to sell the curriculum because there's such a huge demand for used books, and we were able to move on to what helped our family better.
And then one child might not be a worksheet person, and one child might be a
Might be,
worksheet
yes.
person. So, they're also different personalities that you're educating to.
Yes.
But you said something, I don't know if it was in our outtakes or not, but about learning how you, the teacher, loves
Yes.
learning, because that's how you're going to shine into your children.
Yes, that was
I mean,
wonderful.
You have to enjoy what you're
Have you
teaching.
ever, I had this, I took a math class with our PE coach.
That all my math is PE coaches. Yeah.
He had no love of math.
We watched basketball outtakes the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I had a teacher.
3-pointer plus 2.
Right?
Right, yeah, there you go. But that was super passionate about like science, right? I didn't even have to like science to start liking science.
Yeah.
They were just so passionate, had so much fun in the class. I'm like, so then you go home and you're like, guess what I learned? Guess what I learned? Well, what did you learn in algebra? I have no idea. I have no idea, right? So the teacher, like bringing that joy. So find out first, like what lights you, and what doesn't light you. You find a friend. Like, oh, so you love teaching this writing? How? I mean, I'm sorry. Great. And then you say, how about I'll help you with this if you can help my kid here with this. There's where the connection and, the relationships and the friendships come in there.
And you won't have all of that from day one.
Oh, no.
It's an
Definitely built
evolution.
thing, yeah.
No.
You just have to be in it for the long haul, and to know that these things will come with patience and
Oh, yeah.
a will and a desire to grow and to expand.
The goal is to teach your child to love learning, not to complete the curriculum by the end of the year and get an A. The goal is to teach your child to love learning, because if you've taught them to learn, they're going to learn far more than you could ever hope for them to learn. And they will continue. It's like the idiom, teach a man to fish versus giving him fish, you know?
Right.
Okay, so now we're going to delve into the 7 main methods of home education. And those are the classical method, Charlotte Mason, Montessori, unschooling, school at home, unit studies, and eclectic education. And we're going to take those one by one and just kind of give you a short introduction to each of those. We'll also tell you some of the main curriculums that you might be seeing that fall under those categories. So Alicia gets to start with classical.
So this is, I will have to be honest, this is my preferred method, and I get really excited about it, so I apologize if I get a little bit too passionate. Classical education is basically one of the oldest forms of education that has existed. Socrates, Plato, if you go back all the way, this is their method of education, and it's based on great literature and learning within the phases that children go through. So if you read anything up on classical education, you will see that there is what is termed the trivium. And the trivium is 3 stages of growth that a child goes through. It's the grammar stage, the logic stage, and the rhetoric stage. And the grammar stage is like from kindergarten all the way through to 5th grade. And then the logic stage is that middle school stage, and then the rhetoric stage is the high school stage. So if you look at the grammar stage, if you think about your child, how does your child learn when they're like kindergarten to grade 5? There's a lot of why, a lot of questions like why, or how, what is this? I rephrase what is this? Like if you think about your kids, they're always pointing, what is this? What is this? What is this? So that is the way a child works. They're like a little sponge. And then during this stage, they just absorb facts. They don't need to know why it's that way. They don't need to know where it came from. It just is. And so this is a great stage for language learning, just for storing all those facts in there. They learn poetry, songs, like memorization work. They just pick it up like that. And then once they move into the logic stage, it's the why. Now, why is this like that? So now their little brain starts sorting all the information that you have given them through this sponge stage. And then once you get to the rhetoric stage, then it's learning to write and speak intelligently and be able to express myself logically and put my thoughts in order and make myself understood, or even convince somebody else of my point of view, but to speak well, I suppose, or write well. And when you're teaching with classical education, as you, for instance, take Tom Sawyer and you're reading it to your child, or your child is actually reading it, hopefully by this stage your child will read it for themselves. Classical education will say, well, let's look at the storyline, what happened, and then we'll write it down and we'll speak about it. So even during your lesson stage, you're implementing so many different kinds of factors. You don't have just a grammar time or just a history time or just a science time. They're constantly intermingling with each other as you're going through books. That doesn't mean we don't have a specific science time. Doesn't mean we don't have a specific history time. But understanding, for instance, that Tom Sawyer lived during a very specific time in history, and it's portraying this American history period and what went on right there, and what's the author trying to communicate. And the child is learning vocabulary, the child is learning spelling, the child is learning to write properly. It's constantly building in all these factors. But it's a book about a boy who is having a really, and he's a boy's boy. So it really, my son enjoyed Tom Sawyer so much when we went through that. He really connected with that. More so than I think that he will connect with some of the books, Pride and Prejudice, I think we're supposed to read. I don't think he'll connect with all of them.
Mr. Darcy, maybe his favorite person.
Although Christy is very excited about Pride and Prejudice this year. So I think that in a nutshell, that is what it is, what the classical education is. And there are so many different kinds of curriculum. I'm looking up here on a board that Amber has for us. There's Classical Conversations, which many of you may have heard of, My Father's World, Tapestry of Grace, Veritas Press, Memoria Press, or Learning Adventures. I'm not familiar with Learning Adventures, but the others, for us as a family, we have actually come to the point where I was laughing with Sarah earlier. We've gone to an evolution. It's been kind of eclectic. We've taken a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and because it's our family, our unique situation.
Right.
So be open to the fact that even though this is classical education and my family is locked into classical education, we firmly believe in it, we're not just going to lock into one particular curriculum.
And that's where you'll see the timelines. I know you use a classical, you have a timeline, we have a timeline. And for my younger children, it's making those memory pegs, and like you've described, you get to the next stage of the trivium and you're weaving thread through those memory pegs to create a web of understanding until they can then express that understanding.
Yes.
So my children may be able to tell you the dates of World War II and the main powers in World War II, but they can't give you.
But then if they learn, like my grandfather came from Germany in 1919, okay, so now we have a reference for what was going on in Germany in 1919 and why maybe he chose to come to the United States, that, you know, he didn't feel safe there and that's why he came here. But it gives them that baseline to say, oh, in Tom Sawyer, now they have context for what was going on in the United States at that time, in Missouri or, you know, wherever that they know that the Western expansion is happening and that things are going on, and so they can put a deeper understanding into that context.
And for me, I'm South African. American history is not something I'm familiar with, but I have learned so much as my children. And it's not just learning American history, it's learning global history. What was going on in Europe while this was happening in America? What was going on in Africa? What was going on in Asia? I love how it gives such a global understanding that I am not isolated within my world. I am part of a universe.
Well, and you can see that what was going on in Africa at a certain time is going to affect what's going on in Europe at a certain time, that they are all interconnected.
And my child starts making notes about good leadership. What does good leadership look like? Why was this person a bad leader?
Definitely. Okay, so the next style we're going to talk about is Charlotte Mason. You see this a lot with elementary and junior high. There are curriculum now that do include high school, and they do a good job of it, but for the most part, it was for the younger ages. It was a front leader in the 19th century. It was actually created by a nanny and a tutor, and it's a very cost-effective curriculum because most of it is download. It doesn't use a lot of worksheets and those type of physical manipulatives and things like that. It was created by a nanny and a tutor who needed a cost-effective way to help other nannies and tutors educate their young children. During this time period, they were really only educating children up to like the 6th grade level before they went off to university and to get, you know, maybe trade training. And so it was created for that group of people. It's a very popular method of education right now because it's very cozy. I think it's a cozy curriculum.
In it too.
Yeah,
Lots of
there's a lot of
flexibility.
freedom.
Great. It includes lots of reading, classic novels, great works, great literature. You're incorporating that into your curriculum. There's actually Charlotte Mason curriculums that are created all around maybe the Beatrix Potter series or the Little House series. Like they'll create a curriculum around that really rich literature. It does a really good job about including nature. There's a lot of journaling included, not a lot of worksheets, not a lot of testing type things. Like you're not going to be really checking off boxes. It has a very soft flowing rhythm to it. It is a beautiful curriculum. If you are a more structured person, I think you can make it work for you. But I find that it's a very much more of a relaxed way to approach education. I think it's a great start for people
Yeah.
who are really worried about that structure and have younger children.
Yeah, and to say, just because your child's 5 doesn't mean they have to know X, Y, Z, what maybe the public school is expecting them to know or be able to read at 5 or whatever. It's more, she has suggestions by age, like your child, and it's not what you would expect. It's like, the names of the bugs and things like that it's much more relaxed.
And now the Charlotte Mason method is has a very core belief that you engage the mind in the morning, the heart in mid-afternoon, and then the hands later in the evening time, later afternoon. So that would be, you do your curriculum, your work with the children, maybe your like intense read alouds where you're teaching more fluidly from that. The afternoon would be more for poetry, tea, things like that, engaging the heart. And then the afternoon is going to be for handicrafts, knitting, woodworking, things with their hands, play, imaginative play. It is a great curriculum. They do find ways to interweave a lot with one another, so the science is very interwoven with the history. It is a Christian-based curriculum. At the very core of it, it is Christian. And so if you are trying to stay more neutral without having that biblical worldview approach to it, you are going to have a hard time, because all of the curriculum you're going to use it's interwoven in it, and you really can't take it out. It's at the very center of the curriculum itself. So it's great, and I find it's a great curriculum that stands alone. But I find that you will see it mixed in with a lot of eclectic type curriculums too. So Ambleside Online is Charlotte Mason. Queen Homeschool, 5 in a Row, Sunlight. I feel like Sunlight is something people hear a lot about. Winter Promise, and then also A Gentle Feast is a Charlotte Mason inside.
And Ambleside is free online.
Yes.
So if you're looking for a soft entrance to this, you have young children and you don't want to spend a lot of money on a curriculum, that's a great toe touch into stepping into these waters.
So a lot of the pictures you see that you might feel inspired by on social media with all the wooden toys, it's very, you have that like nice little moody look to it, and all the nature things.
There's
That's
books and nature.
lots of books.
Yeah.
It's lots of books,
Fern
lots of
laying on
reading,
top.
lots of good fern. That's probably has a Charlotte Mason inspiration to it. Great literature. I'm a huge proponent of read alouds with your children and reading good books to them. And Charlotte Mason really harnesses that in teaching your children. So it's a good curriculum.
Yes, I feel like we've been more to that side. So even though it sounds very the tea and poetry, y'all just hang on a second, because I had the 4 boys. So it didn't just look like that. It was like, it was
And
different.
cost effective. I think that's something that's
Yeah.
important to know, that Charlotte Mason is a very cost effective curriculum.
It was.
You can make it expensive.
Just like anything.
Yeah.
Any curriculum.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one would be a Montessori. So this is great to speak about, because I actually spoke about my son. We entered him into a Montessori school. So this Montessori method, they do have schools like this. So if you're trying to do this at home, it was invented by Maria Montessori, and I guess the gist of it is, like she says, don't do something for a child that they could rightly do themselves. And that's pretty much, it's child-led. It would be having them set the table. It's very orderly. Very orderly. And now I'm just having a light bulb. This totally didn't work for my child. I see why. But, or myself. But it was very orderly. It had them folding their napkins, pouring their own water. Everything they did on their own, with child size, everything. Their toys were made to be real textile. So they did the sandpaper lettering, which we did love. We did love that. We had there's sandpaper letters, so as they're learning the phonics and the letters, they're using different senses. So it's very sensory, and that was something that we did keep. My boys did like that, the sensory aspect to it. Using a lot of wooden things. We had a lot of wooden things. We spent a lot of money on those wooden things. They're just like little shapes, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. I do not still to this day know why that costs so much. one of the things that I do like is the child-led. That could be such a wide open gate right there, because you do want to have a child-led, like what are they interested in, and then really kind of come and pour in. But for us, the structure of like me going at their wheel and leading the whole day just was not going to work for us like that. Other aspects about the Montessori besides
Did you have the
order?
$150 rainbow?
No, no, we didn't. We did make like all the wooden peg people, but then we're crossing back over like Charlotte Mason.
Yeah.
You know, and these do intertwine, and I feel that you can use some parts of each of them as you go. It's really morphed into that for us, but
So is that just there? It's just very tactile, even when you get to the math and the history. Like, how is that
yes,
Montessori?
the tactile letters, learning on their own, and them telling you what they learned. Not Charlotte Mason, we're like, so I read a book and I ask them to narrate back what they got from the book. It's not that. It's, they would have a worksheet with different shapes, and they only learned what they picked up from when she explained it. But it's very much at their own pace. So like they would come and go from the table. So if you're okay with that,
Less structured.
less structured but very orderly. I don't know, there's not much for the, where is the Montessori? Hilltop, Montessori Unlimited, and the Child-Led Life.
It still is in a lot of private schools. This is where Montessori mainly occurs.
It is,
You
and
can
it
bring
doesn't
home.
go very, like, to the high school. I don't know how you would actually continue that on to high school in such a way. But they're learning everything. So they're filling up a cup halfway full. So it's, how much is that? There's 4 ounces or whatever. They're plating the plate and counting the peas as they put them on there. Everything is done with their hands. And she had a great idea, which was to empower the child in learning for themselves, but also not as organized as this is what we're going to learn this week. So, you know, that was just, there's an option.
That comes to me, and I'm talking about unschooling, which is not something I'm very familiar with, but we talked earlier about John Holt and his revolt from the public school in the 70s, and it was very much that. It was very reactionary. So he saw this, it's not working, so my reaction is what? When we violently react to something, we go completely opposite, and that is what unschooling is. It's just the polar opposite. But John Holt is the father of unschooling. He really had a heart for children and a heart for learning. And I think that this might work for some families, so I'm glad that we're addressing it. But it's as it sounds. There's very little sit-down learning. It's very child-led. What are they interested in? What do they want to do? Of course, in the elementary years, you're going to have mathematics, reading, and some systemic learning. It's very reading based. So if they can't read, you're going to struggle with that. Obviously we've said read alouds is a big thing that we all do. But it's very, find a subject that your child's interested in. They find the subject that they're interested in. They say, hey, mama, I want to do this. Let's go to the library and find books about that. So it's much looser, and that might seem like something, if you're like a laid back person, you might think, oh, that loose structure is going to be great for me, but I think it's kind of counterintuitive. If you have a loose structured curriculum, it means you're going to have to be hyper structured, or you're going to lose things through the cracks. So I really like having a structured curriculum, because I can build my lesson, and then if it doesn't go exactly as planned, it's okay, because the curriculum catches my crumbs. So there might be some crumb leaving behind. And so I kind of was trying to think this through last night. And if your child is really interested in dinosaurs, that's great. We can do, there is like 8 million books about dinosaurs. You can go on field trips, you could really fill up a whole curriculum with dinosaurs. But then what if they're not interested at all in telling time? Let me tell you, it's a struggle to teach kids to tell time. And so, there might not be a lot of concrete ways to take dinosaurs and make that into a productive part of society. But if you can't tell time, you're going to struggle every day.
Right.
And that's not to say that any curriculum doesn't have holes. I think we all can maybe see some holes that our curriculums have, and but it's just that's a downfall that I see with unschooling. But this is really great for students who have different learning styles that thrive on hands-on learning. It's a lot of hands-on field trips. And we've talked, all of us, about desiring a love of learning in our children and desiring that in our homes. And so I do think this fosters a love of learning. And we kind of were talking before, we didn't all know each other before this, that we're all kind of interwovenly connected. So I said, does anyone do unschooling? Because I don't want to offend anybody. And we all kind of say, yes, in certain ways we do. Like my kids really got into history last year. And so we were able to dive deep into those things, but at the same time still hold on to our curriculum. So there are times and ways where we do child-led learning, but that's an extra. That's our extracurricular, not our main curriculum. One thing, I was reading a bunch of different websites, and I have some here, but a lot of experiments, a lot of video game lessons. So like if your child's interested in Minecraft, that's something where there is a lot of learning going on there. We are not screen people at our house, but you can build something out of that if you have those conversations with your children and really apply that in that kind of way. If you think that your child, maybe you have an older child and they come to a point where they're not loving learning, maybe this is a time where you could time out and draw out what they're interested in, like we were talking about with the biology. It could be a time and maybe a pivot for a minute in your curriculum, but and maybe some families this is what they do. One challenge that I read about is kind of reinventing the proverbial wheel. Of course, your children need to know certain things, and so if you don't have a set curriculum to fall back on, that could be a struggle for a parent because you're going to have to come up with that somehow and you don't have the curriculum to fall back on. If you are interested in unschooling, if you feel like, man, this would be great for my family, great for my kids, obviously, I don't have a list of curriculums to give you because it's not curriculum based, but there's a website. It's called johnholtgws.com. The GWS is called Growing Without School.
Then he has a book called that.
He has a book called that. And there's videos on there. There's a lot of great resources, articles, suggestions. There's also another website called Unschooled Rules, unschooledrules.com, and that follows a family. Their daughter's name is Asher. She's in 8th grade, and it's a blog, so it's just really great to follow. And he has different pullouts, like unschooling math. Here's how we do it. And he mentioned Life of Fred. That is the curriculum, a math and science curriculum, and it's very story based. And so I think. I also read on another website that that's something that unschooled families fall to for math, for something where you need a little bit of structure. Let's see. I think. Oh, it's free, obviously. There's no curriculum to buy, so it's free. But
that could get pricey.
Yeah. That can get pricey.
Field trips are not free. Buying the manipulatives for a really great dive in science lesson. Like we're doing human anatomy this year at our house, and I was like, oh, could I get a man? No, I can't. But if that's really what you wanted to get,
she means a skeleton.
Like a skeleton man. No,
can I get a man?
But the
where
the organs come out and all that. Yeah, okay, that's the kind of man I need. If anyone else wants to use
one with bones.
We actually got a man last
year. Did you? I can't afford it this year.
I think the common misconception with unschooling, however, is that it's just you're doing nothing.
Right.
And it's almost like it's not effortless to do nothing.
Right.
Like you are relaxing it for your child and unschooling them from that structure, but it takes so much planning for mom to be like, okay,
it can be
how am I going to act like I am effortlessly tying history into, and sometimes that's a great way to discover yourself in that. What does your new role as an educator look like?
Right. So that was another, I'm going to kind of morph this into another thing that you might have heard of. If your kids have been in school, it's called deschooling. So unschooling, okay, we're going to kind of pull back. Now we're in deschooling. So if your child has gone to school for any amount of time, even 1 year, it suggested, or even 6 months, it suggested that you take 1 month for every year that your student was in a traditional school model, not at home, and break. Just don't.
So unschooling is a method of
Right.
homeschool. Deschooling is
It's
a
a
process,
time.
a
It's a time
transitional
period.
process.
Right.
Talks like.
So
A detox.
no, it's a detox, but really it is. So your child is used to responding to a teacher, being in a setting, and there's a depression that they go through from being pulled out of that situation. I mean, if I was hanging out with if I was doing this every day, and then I had to go hang out with my kids every day, I'd be like, I want to go back to hanging out with my friends.
Well,
Yeah,
and
this is
parents are
fun.
deschooling right now from what their life looked like before. They're
Yes,
trying to
yeah.
fit that old life into
Right.
this new.
So it's a stage for you as well, because you had to, maybe you did have 4 days a week where you were free to do what do your stuff. Not that you weren't doing anything, but
to live your life.
have fun and go to the shop on your own. But
Maybe you've been deschooling all through the past few months.
yes, I think a lot of people have been since March deschooling, but it's a time for you and your child to get reacquainted with what your relationship is and maybe change what that looks like. But toward the end of that time, so say your kid has been in school for 4 years, so you're coming to month 3 into month 4, maybe doing some unschooling would be a great thing. So maybe wake up, one day and say, okay, it's time for us to learn something together. So is there something you want to learn about? Or let them, one thing that John Holt says is, who's asking the questions in your house? If it's the children, good. So let them come to you and say, I'm interested in XYZ, whatever it is. Learning more about the Industrial Revolution, for instance. I mean, it might not come out that way. It might be, I'm interested in Minecraft, but you can build on that a little bit as you, again, softly walk into the waters of home-centered education. I think
Awesome.
that's it. Oh, I have one more thing to say about that. I just looked at my notes. I talked about last night after my kids went to bed. Let your children teach you. I think no matter what curriculum you use, let your children teach you. Again, we want adults coming from our homes who love to learn and can learn and are capable of learning. And so I have just found that when my kids teach me something that I didn't know, and honestly, they teach me so much, and learning, or even just learning something new together, that strengthens our relationship with each other and my love of learning, and then that turns on for me and it shines through them. So that's just
Well, and we can't teach our children to be teachable if we're not teachable.
yes. Yeah. Lead learner. That's one you'll hear that. Be the lead learner.
And even as I'm just jumping in here, but having high schoolers now, and what that looks so different from when they were young and so excited to tell me about everything they learned about. So having those good conversations with my boys who are reading books that I haven't even read, right? And I'm like, oh, let me know what happens in this next chapter, and it kind of keeps them a little more excited to come back and tell me about the character, and I'm like, oh, good. Not always am I interested, but a lot of the times it just sparks great conversation through us, and I'm like, wow, they're so much ahead of the game than I was. There was no way I could sit and read that book in high school and have gotten something that deep out of it, So that open conversation, I'm just going to encourage you, that happens all the way through. So after they're grown, and after they're grown and married, and you're sitting at the table and having dinner, you have all of these little memories back, where we read the book, where we went to this field trip, where we did this experiment, where we learned these things, and for that, I would be forever grateful for. So anyway, I think that was just great, just the conversation, letting them teach me empowers them to even on their own learn more. So you, Annie, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I have school at home, which is the traditional school. This is what most public and private schools use. This is actually what I usually suggest to first-time homeschoolers or anybody who plans on homeschooling for a short period of time, because it's what we're used to learning, right? I guess we got all traditional schooled.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's easy to jump back into public and private school if you're going to be doing it for a short time. And because you're staying on the same pace as them, it can be expensive, I guess. It's very workbook heavy, but it's also easy to use because there's like one manual and you just take out a book, you write in the workbook. So it's very open and go. You can buy a boxed curriculum. But it also can be kind of more time consuming too.
A lot of checklists.
Right. Systematic. It's also good too if you're planning on doing higher learning because they stay with the federal and state regulations. So you can the standardized testing, I guess, would be easier because you know what to expect for that. This is actually what I started out using too, but we didn't love it. Because I wanted me and the kids to bond more, and everybody was doing their own thing. So I wanted more sit-down learning as a whole family, more nature studies and read-alouds. So we switched curriculums a few times, but we eventually went to classical.
Now, a lot of people are doing distance learning now, which is different than study at home a little bit, because distance learning is simply your school providing education through a virtual platform. School at home can be led by the parent, or you may be doing something virtually, or a combination of.
Right.
So that's the difference, is school at home, you're still choosing the curriculum. Distance learning, your school would be choosing that for you.
There's also K-12. I think everything is online. But other curriculums are Becca. That's a Christian one. It's most popular I hear. Alpha Omega is Rod and Stab, Christian Light, and Laurel Springs was a distance one.
Yeah, Laurel Springs I think is something new. You'll probably, if you've been doing research, you'll find that it has search engine optimization right now, so it pops up for any really homeschool search you do, but it's like an online learning system. And they're accredited and all of that type of thing.
I feel like when you're like, okay, we're going to homeschool, it's fine. Everyone kind of starts out in that block, right? We're trying to make school just like it was what they were doing at home.
We don't want to fail our kids. So
I have them wearing uniforms.
You go, girl!
I might bring that back.
A lot of people do that.
I mean, all this laundry, I might just bring back those uniforms. So, but I feel like we did that. I had them stand up, and we started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
We absolutely do.
Did you that?
We do the preamble. My
Oh,
children,
sure.
I have no idea what they're saying. They're like, "And our posterity, do our duty." We'll get to the
So I
understanding
feel
one
like
day.
everybody just starts there. It's safe. It feels natural.
Right.
You've been there. They've been there. So we're going to create this at home, and then you're just like, whoa, go outside and play.
Right.
And then we're going to rethink this thing, right?
Well, I think a lot of moms are scared they're going to fail their kids. They're not going to be able to teach them. So they want to do what is comfortable. And what is comfortable is what we did in school.
But
I actually
they
see
recommend,
this.
like, if they're pulling them out of school, get something like that boxed, because you're going to just...
It's overwhelming just to start homeschooling.
Yes.
So I feel
Right.
like choosing that where everything's already laid out for you, just open and go, is just an easy way to start.
I was really scared when I started out that I was going to have all these massive learning gaps, and my children were going to be so impeded by the time that we got through this business that I started actually with accelerated Christian education, which is similar to Abeka.
Yes. I did that to my children 1 year, too.
And that was actually, it helped me understand that I was not going to mess this thing up. And it also helped me understand who my children were. So if you are scared and you're just like, I don't even know where to start, then order it, even though it's backlog, and it'll come in when it comes in, and when it comes in, you can start. And you will find out who your children are, and you will find out who you are. Or what you said earlier, if you have a little bit more confidence in yourself, start with teaching your children the way you love learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Unit studies.
I'm unit studies. Okay, I need help. So from what I understand, unit studies are like Weaver, Wild and Free, Winter Promise, My Father's World, and Tapestry of Grace.
And The Good and the Beautiful has unit studies as well.
Mm-hmm. So as I understand it, you just take one subject. It's just subject matter. It's not interrelated with anything else. It might be just math, or just nature study, or just language. Am I correct so far?
Yeah, a lot of people do these as subject-based, so it may
Yes.
be like aquamarine, like a whole study on aquamarine or marine life, you know?
Yeah, I know with master books, we ordered some, and it was just on engineering, and it was engineering and how they borrow from science, and we did that for a year because my son was just so interested, he expressed the desire. So that may be something that might be helpful.
So I went on Weaver's site last night because I was doing research and just came upon unit studies. But on Weaver's site, so like say it's marine life, what it's actually doing, so you're diving deep in marine life, okay, in science, but it's saying it's going to draw in the history of marine science, and then it's going to draw in, maybe the geology or geography of marine science. And so it's kind of trying to draw all the subjects in to what your main focus is, from what I understood from Weaver's site. So the Weaver actually has a kind of a good visual that you're trying to weave. You're diving deep into one thing, but you're seeing how all of the other things are connected to it.
Well, and this would be kind of like what exploring nature with children would be.
Right.
Except it's 1 week, periods,
Mhm,
increments.
right.
So you might be studying honeybees for a week, but you're focusing on honeybees. You're learning some geography. You're like tying all of that in.
The vocabulary words,
Shapes.
spelling from that. Yes.
And you do what's age appropriate for your children. So the unit studies that we incorporate with the Good and the Beautiful, or wherever I get it, are usually short, like maybe 6 weeks or a month, and it may be like on safety. And we're teaching them fire safety and electrical safety and stranger safety, and or it may be on space. And you're doing like 6 weeks of space and incorporating. It's not replacing ELA, which is English language arts, or math, but it is including it. It's part of the tapestry. So that's kind of what unit studies are. And you lay them out. Which kind of leads us into eclectic. So eclectic would be what some people would call like an umbrella method, where you're doing a combination. So we use the Good and the Beautiful. We also use classical conversations. And the Good and the Beautiful is actually considered eclectic because it's a mix of classical and Charlotte Mason. There's lots of eclectic. Master Books is eclectic because Master Books goes into unit studies, and there's some classical and there's some Charlotte Mason there. And what it is you're just combining different things that you love about each method, which can be beneficial, but it can also be dangerous, because if you're taking the best of both worlds, or the best of all the worlds, but you're not cohesively doing it in a way that has a good rhythm to it, you could just implode yourself. And it may be because if you don't want to take the time to understand the methodology and the discipline behind each curriculum and the philosophy about why it exists, and you're just choosing something so you can, it kind of makes your education a buffet rather than, an a la carte type thing. You could be missing the point because you're teaching from a place of not understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And so the negative parts of those curriculums could sneak in, and you not know how to protect yourself against them or to keep them out of the picture because you didn't even understand that was what that was there in the first place.
Right.
Like you were saying, there could be gaps in the curriculum, and you're not catching the crumbs because you weren't even aware that those gaps were there.
Right, and if you don't have a philosophy and you're not standing firm on what you believe is working for your family, and you're just kind of pulling from wherever and everywhere, then you're going to feel frazzled, for one thing. You're not going to feel like your purpose isn't going to be as well defined, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so to have a well-defined purpose, and trust me, there are days where I have to go to my book that I wrote when Asher was 4 and say,
what is my
this
mission statement?
This is why I'm doing this. Today's not a good day, and everyone's outside playing now because we quit, because everyone's just butting heads.
We're doing a unit starting on dirt.
Right. My kids have all that. But I find that it's incredibly important to have a why, and not just you, but you and your husband have a why, and your family have a why. That's incredibly important to know why you're doing this.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, we saw what happened when in reactionary. So I know right now it might be easy to be reactionary to what's going on in the school systems, but I do think it's wise to pray over that, meditate over that, dive deep into really why you're choosing this for your family.
And I have to say, like, we're talking about gaps. There's going to be gaps.
Yeah.
Your public school kids are going to have gaps too.
I had gaps,
I have
right?
so many
Did
gaps.
you have gaps
Yes.
in your education?
Yes.
There's going to be gaps. Doesn't mean that they can't be filled. I feel like I've kind of filled some of those gaps, learning them through this with the kids. I've learned more about history in these past few years than I ever had. So don't be afraid. Don't let that like count you out, saying, well, it's just not going to be enough, or I might fail them in whatever. You will. You will.
Yeah.
I mean, you even in your child rearing, you're going to look back and go, oh, if only I had, or I wish we had. There's always that when you're looking back. So I don't think that would ever discount you from taking on the calling to homeschool. So.
And there's more than just the 7 main ones we mentioned, but they have so many similar characteristics to these top core 7. You know, there's Waldorf and things like that. And if that's something that piques your interest, study more about it. And if you understand the 7 methods we just explained, you'll have a deeper understanding of what that is and what that looks like.
I think it's pretty clear from our conversation that a lot of us have picked a method that works well for our personality and our family, but that does not disclude us from including other methods in. So I know a lot of us really follow a pretty classical base, but draw from unit studies or draw from, Montessori, if that's something that we're interested in, or, a lot of us draw from some Charlotte Mason. So
and you need to know your family, because
Yes.
Charlotte Mason is very antiquated. And when people try to modernize it, it kind of feels like you're just tacking something modern on something antique, and that doesn't really always work. So understanding your family is huge, and that might be part of that deschooling process.
Yes.
Is I don't even really understand my family or their learning
or
style.
how my child learns, exactly. I mean,
You'll figure that out in the first year.
definitely. And
they
each
change
child
everything.
is different. So, I have 2 that sit very happily at the table, and the 4-year-old is 4, but no 4-year-old's going to sit happily at the table for very long. But I can tell from his energy and his personality that we're going to have to do some things differently for him. And so just knowing your children and watching them grow, so that during that deschooling time, or if your child is young and coming into this, really study them, study what lights their fire, study what ignites them, because it's going to be different for each one of your children.
So is she here?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm about to add her if you guys are ready.
Yes, we're going to do something fun. I have a friend. She's connecting now, but she is going to be phone interviewing in with us.
All right.
Awesome.
I didn't know about this.
It's a surprise!
I stole your stuff.
Are you here,
she's
Erin? Okay. So this is my friend Erin. Erin is in California. Hi, Erin.
You guys hear me?
Yes. We wanted Erin to speak just for a short.
Awesome. My connection initially is not super great, so hopefully it'll
Stabilize itself.
get better.
Sound good.
Okay, so what I wanted Erin to speak to is the fact that Erin's in California, and last year when school started, she was kind of forced into a position to choose to homeschool her children in a very quick reactionary moment. And I know there's a lot of moms out there who feel like, is this going to work? Because it wasn't a choice that I got to make. It wasn't a choice that, it was just an easy, we just decided one night. I had to decide because my back was against the wall. And even though homeschooling was something that I think occurs naturally to Erin, she might argue that it was a decision she had to make really quickly, and I want her to speak to what that felt like and how that evolved for her.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for asking me to be on here, first of all. I think I'm excited that you guys are doing this, and I think so many moms are looking for someone to just tell them to take deep breaths. If you have to do this, it's going to be okay, right? It's just kind of a crazy time in our world right now, and I think a lot of moms are feeling very scared and very confused. So I just want people to know that I have been there. Homeschool is something I always just kind of was interested in, but never fully wanted to commit to. But I saw so much value in it and having my kids home, and I love having my kids home. And last year in California, because of certain legislation, I was pregnant, I was sick, I put off the decision all summer long because I just, wanted to kind of wait until I had to make a choice, because I just was scared, and probably like a lot of moms are feeling right now, this exact same situation, even though it's a little different, it's the same feeling of like, oh man, am I gonna have to do this? Because it feels like a lot. So I literally waited until like the day that I had to let my kids' school know if I was gonna be sending them or not. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. And I did. I totally feel like I had my back up against the wall. And it was scary, but I had so many amazing friends who were doing it. Amber was a great resource to me. Just so much support along the way. And now looking back, especially since everything in the world has gone crazy, I have seen it as the biggest blessing for myself, for my family, for my kids. It's really, I think, just given me a gift of more time with my kids, which as moms is like a double-edged sword sometimes, but they're only little for so long, and so that has been really invaluable to me, is just having more time. And the thing that I want moms to remember the most, I think, when they're in this position of trying to decide, is you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be a teacher. You don't have to be the smartest or the most organized. I am like probably the least organized person in the world. As long as you do a few basic things, you will be successful. I really, last year was my first year homeschooling, and I honestly, I could have done so much better. When it was my first year too, like I said, I was pregnant. It was last minute decision, so I felt very unprepared. But my kids still, I only had one daughter in first grade. So even kind of having a disadvantage in terms of what you would like to think you would like to be going into an experience like homeschool, I still feel like it was really a successful year, and she thrived, and she did so well, and she tested above, in all her tests, and so she's doing great. And that was without a lot of preparation on my part, because I was sick, and then I had a baby, and all these things, you know what I mean? So I think when we try to bring the school environment home, then we are setting ourselves up for failure. But if you just start with a clean slate and say, I'm going to do this my way, I'm going to observe my child and see what they need, and, bottom line, just to make sure they know that they're loved, you're going to be successful no matter what. So I think that's my takeaway from it all.
That's perfect.
Adaptation. Thank you so much,
great.
Erin.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, of course. Oh man, just be prayerful about it and go with your gut, I think that was what really, on the day I was supposed to decide, my gut just said, nope, this is what you need to do. And so that's what I did, and just kind of dove in head first, and it's all worked out for the best, so.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks for joining us. I wish you could be here in person.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I'll hop off, but you guys have fun.
You're great. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye. You're welcome. Bye.
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 Okay, so I think you probably got the gist of what all of us use in our homes. We're pretty much all eclectic, I think.
Yeah.
A big
Yeah.
classical foundation. You consider yourself eclectic. Sarah has done it all.
We've used, most of that.
Most everything Sarah has done.
Yeah, well, in the 4 years, I feel like I've already done mostly everything.
Yeah. You just tap. You put your hand in the cookie jar a few times, to get
Right
that
now,
taste.
we're still doing 3 different things.
Yeah.
But you found a rhythm for what works for you. And that's what you do, is you can't sit down with somebody and tell them exactly what they need to do.
Right.
You know, no one can tell me that. You have to figure it out.
Well, what works for me isn't going to work in your house the same way and the same rhythm. You know, everybody's family is different.
Yeah, people have been asking me what curriculum I use. I'm like, I use this, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure this would be good.
I don't think you'd like it. People ask me a lot like, oh yeah, it sounds so great to like take nature walks and do all these fun things, but like, does that even happen? You obviously have to be intentional.
Yeah.
Like, you have to plan these things. Sit down at the beginning of the month. It doesn't take an event planner to create fun in your homeschool life, but it does take intention. You might have to wake up a little bit earlier to get your lessons out. You might have to stay up late on a Sunday night to like look over what you have for the week. But you learn how to integrate fun into all of that. You find friends who help you integrate fun and text you and say, let's go do this. But you do have to be intentional. Like, it doesn't just happen. But that's with anything in life.
Yeah.
Like,
Anything worth doing.
gotta buck up a little. It takes stepping outside of your comfort zone, doing a little bit more than you may want to do, but it's so fun and it's so worth it.
This may be rabbit holing, but I know a question that I've heard a lot from people is, what does it look like? Like, okay, this is great umbrella, but it's 8 a.m. in Annie's house. What does it look like? You know?
Crawling out of bed.
Maybe we could just give a glimpse of what it looks like.
What it looks like, huh?
Every day's different in my house.
Yeah.
And I always say be careful with and this isn't just me. This is like a whole theory. Be careful with your schedules. Your check mark schedules, your dry erase board schedules, like
Plan, but plan to unplanned.
Yes. Plan and then have flexibility within the
Yeah.
plan.
those will lead to disappointment unless you are a spreadsheet woman who has to live and die by your spreadsheet. You need, like, the concept of rhythms is what we use. Like,
Definitely.
you have your rhythms, not your exact time limit, because your heart, like heart palpitations, because like it's 9:30 and everybody throw your pancakes in the sink. Like, we have to go there. We have to do anything. Rhythms are important, and that doesn't mean you're a lazy household and you never get anything done. It does not mean that. It means that you are leaning into education in your home.
I am more of a timeline person.
Okay.
I need that. And that, again, is not to say it's 9:30 and you have to be done with breakfast and everything has to be done. But I think our rhythm thrives well because it's fairly structured.
Well, and
For me, because
you have a full-time student.
I have a lot of responsibilities right now. I want to be really laid back, and I would crawl into that comfort, and then we would be that lazy family, and we would not get things done. So I need the structure for my family, but that doesn't mean plan an entire semester week one. My oldest is now taking responsibility. He just is about to turn 9. He's got his own planner. He and I sit down on Sunday nights and plan his week. And we look back. Last week, okay, like this afternoon, he's not doing a study that he was going to be doing. So we're going to put that off until next week. So every week he writes his schedule, but if things happen in the week and we don't finish, it's not like he's staying up till midnight on Sunday finishing it.
Right.
We're going to
But that's
flex
also
it
really
into
good about
next
teaching
week.
him accountability, and that, like, if you don't finish what you have today, you are mortgaging tomorrow.
Right.
With that, like, and it makes them want to be more responsible for their duties. Like, I do want to do this because I don't want this to stack up.
And one thing Andrew Pudawa says is the kids, and I see this in my kids, if they can check it off, like he's so excited to highlight out when he's finished. He reached his goal, he did it, and he gets joy out of saying, I'm finished with that, and moving on to the next thing. But so I'm not saying like every minute at our house is scheduled, but I need it for me. And we have been a part of a community, and being a part of a community like that, where we meet every week and there's expectations every week, I can't drop the ball, because if I drop the ball, then my kids aren't prepared for community that day. So that helps me too, to have the accountability to meet with families every week has been good for me. That's me. That's my house.
Well, I'm a lot like you.
Yeah.
If I had my absolute heart's wishes, we would just float.
Mm-hmm.
Like little fairies, we just float from thing to thing, and all be at peace. But then we wouldn't learn the way that we should learn. We should push ourselves to love learning, right? And it's a wonderful thing to be able to accomplish goals and look back and see, this is what I've done, and this is what I would like to do. And so for me, I had to grow into this as well, and I've learned to set schedules. Now that again doesn't mean that we're stuck in cement and we cannot budge from that 1 inch to one way or the other. It just means that it's a guideline. It kind of keeps us in our lane, and it helps us be able to feel satisfied at the end of the day. Look at what I have accomplished. I've been productive. I've done what I've set out to do, and what I will do tomorrow. And that whole idea of mortgaging. Yeah, we've had to learn that the hard way. Setting goals and learn. The kids will tell me, "Oh yeah, we've done it, we've completed it." And then when you go back and you look, it's not been done.
Right.
But then they had to learn what we have to learn as grown-ups, that what I didn't do yesterday falls on top of what needs to happen today. It's like cleaning your house. If you don't clean it, when you finally decide 3 months down the line it's going to be clean, you're going to be heartbroken.
Right.
And you want to just burn down the house and walk away. So it's the same way, just helping them learn these things. So for me personally, it's actually that routine, that scheduling has been very helpful, because I also have multiple jobs. Some are just volunteer, some are income, but juggling between everybody's everything, we find a great comfort in the scheduling.
Definitely.
Lydia, is there a question that keeps coming up a lot? No? If anybody has any questions on the live, feel free to ask them. And we can try to answer what we can. You know, we've been here for a little minute. What is some of your favorite resources for a mom who's considering homeschooling?
Definitely Kathy Duffy.
Kathy Duffy.
Teaching from Rest by
Oh,
Sarah.
that is such a great book. Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, thank you.
Thank you.
And she also, I know we all said read aloud about 80 times, each of us. She also has a podcast and a book called Read Aloud Revival.
Yes.
It will bring so much light to your family to start reading aloud.
A read aloud simply means you are reading aloud
Right.
together.
Yeah.
You sit down or don't sit down if you have toddlers. You gather your family and you read. And even older students, my children can read.
Love to
They
still
love
be
it.
read to.
Yes.
And I have people ask me constantly, how do you get to the point that this is fun? Because my children are all over the place and talking and don't listen. It's like anything else. It's a discipline. It's a practice. The personal trainer's like, yes.
Yeah.
I used Timberdoodle one year, which
I feel like that was yesterday. Like, so much time has passed. That was years ago.
Anyway, so they don't have their own curriculum. What they do is they pick and choose from other people's curriculum and make one big box. But it changes every year, and I like to go every year and see what they have, because there's also extra stuff. And they have like the new cool manipulatives and games and puzzles. So every year I look and I see what's new, and so I add to my armoire of homeschool stuff. We have some scrunch maps, which are some maps that fit into a little bag, but you pull them out and you just scrunch them back up.
Yeah, that is a good one.
That's actually how I found our math that we use too, because I don't use the math that Memorial Press has. I use Matthew C, and it comes with counting rods, I guess you call them. So every year I go on there too and buy the Matthew C curriculum.
I found Well-Trained Mind by the mother and daughter team, and it not only helps me with curriculum, it helps me understand the age, the growth stage my child is in, and it gives me some really good ideas on how to approach the learning process. So it's kind of become one of those go-tos on my bookshelf.
We love Wild and Free, and I know Sarah is the leader of Wild and Free Louisiana, but it's kind of like, I think some people are confused about what it is.
Well,
It's like an ethos.
I'm following it, but I don't know what it is.
So Wild and Free was like mamas that came together, and they were just like, let's do this together, let's scratch it, let's go to nature. And it's really evolved, but it was more to pull in a community of just getting into nature, learning as your kids are learning. You know, we made it now into like a group. So there's groups all over the United States, but ours is kind trying to take those mamas that aren't really all into nature at first, yeah. And we start them real slow. When I say we have a hike and they're like, oh my goodness, okay, call Lands in, let's start on this. Call Lands in. No, step back. It's like cemented here. And then it turns to a wooden walkway, and then, which is much like your homeschool journey, right? You just come in here until you get to the dirt.
When we went there, it's like, children, please get out of the bayou.
Stay on the trail. No, don't stay on the trail. But it's a great group. I think it's just more nature focused. The Charlotte Mason, the units, that's kind of all in there. So look them up. Wild plus free.
There's a book called The Call of the Wild and Free. They also have a book of handicrafts that are like by season, because they believe you should teach children not to do things that just get thrown away, but things that show them that they have a sense of accomplishment, that they could helps them to kind of even have that entrepreneurial mindset. Like, how could I evolve these talents and skills? You guys have even had a handicraft fair where they got to sell their products like right before Christmas.
Great. Yeah, they made wooden swords and leather making, earrings, just all sorts of things like that.
But now they've created a community so a lot of the content's free, but you can also pay to be part of the community. I think it's like $20 a month.
Yes.
And you get bundles at the beginning of every...
Like a magazine, a great homeschool magazine.
Very inspirational. It's a pictorial community, and so there's lots of inspirational pictures, good quality, advice from people who have walked the walk and are walking the walk and figuring it out alongside you. And then there's also unit studies. So I think some people get confused. They're like, we're going to do the Wild and Free curriculum. It's like,
no. But I feel like once I found that, no, definitely not. I feel like once I found Wild and we didn't fit in a group.
Yeah.
There were like field trips here, go to the pumpkin patch and go here and there. And I was like, there's just something, okay, those are fun. And when I found the Wild and Free, like, those are my people.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that they were from California.
They have a conference.
They do have a conference twice a year.
Or they did.
We did.
They bought and created a camp.
Oh, yes.
Where they were going to hold like summer camps for moms to get together and to like hold group camp, like family. They have family camp.
They have family camp.
Where goes the family? Is there a question?
Yes.
Okay.
So Sydney would like to know if this is going to be available for her to share with some of her friends that have decided to homeschool.
Yes. So we have Scott here, sitting behind the camera, who is going to have a high quality version of this that we'll be able to post on YouTube and easily share that link. Right, Scott?
And I would just like to say, when we're talking resources, when I backed it all up and I just started to read with the kids, and we're talking about a curriculum to help with reading, and if they're just slower in reading, dyslexic, we used All About Reading.
Yeah, us too.
And it was great. Just, if you want to look into that, that would be a great start. And there was a time where I just did that in math. Okay? There was a time that we just did that, like the reading, writing, arithmetic.
Those basics.
Stop there and then go play.
Yeah. So we use Classical Conversations too, which has a lot of memory work. And my husband was like, okay, I know you love this and doing this, but we need to back up and take that break and just focus. And we still did our CC on the side, but it really was on the side, and we were doing math and reading every morning.
Yes.
And it doesn't take all day. Now, 4th grade on up, it's going to take longer, but in the morning, do you get it done in the morning? We get school done.
Yeah. 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to take all day to do reading and math, but really lay that foundation. And All About Reading is great, especially if you have a struggling reader.
Definitely.
And it's important to know, for people, we get this question a lot. Classical Conversations is great because it's a community, so you're meeting 1 day a week with a community local to you. You're learning your new grammar. We talked about the trivium. You're learning your new grammar, and then it's not a complete curriculum. So you then go home, you do your main subjects, you have your extra math, your extra English language arts, and then you practice your memory work on top of that for 20 minutes a day. And your memory work includes geography, things like that. And then you add in whatever you want. If you want extra science or extra history, unit studies, things like that. So know that about, if you want to choose a curriculum, speak to somebody that's doing that so that you'll know ahead of time that you need, if you need to add things on top of that or what that's going to look like. It's having those conversations.
Yeah, and finding, when you start using a curriculum, you can find groups that use that. So there's like, you know, if you used all about reading, there are actually groups, and then they talk about it and have conversation, and you can get to know other people through that. So online, Facebook, I'm not sure what it is, Instagram. There's tons of
The
like
interwebs.
Yeah.
definitely.
Forums.
Yeah. I know I mentioned IEW really quick. It's actually a company. It's not just one curriculum, but it's called Institute for Excellence in Writing. They have spelling and writing
And it's online.
and you can use it online or you can use it in a group. So Classical Conversations actually does use IEW in their Essentials program, but we're doing it online. So my son sits and watches a recorded class. But it's a great, wonderful resource. We use their spelling and their grammar and their writing. So that's just, it's one of those like, we also use Saxon Math, and they're like tried and true and have been coming through for a long time. And so I tend to trust curriculums like that more, where it's something that I'm less worried that there's going to be cracks. And again, of course, every curriculum has cracks, but it's proven out, I guess I'm trying to say.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, my 2-year-old
And
is trying to
the
go
hash
I'm sorry my foot fell asleep and I almost fell on my face. I could not get feeling back in my foot.
We didn't talk about our curriculums though, or more in depth.
Do you want to?
We can. I didn't want that to like
Persuade people.
bias people to think, I don't know if that's helpful or not. What do you think? Should we tell
Or
what our curriculum
overwhelming.
is?
Oh, yeah.
Scott's legs are
Well, you have
not
2%.
I have 2% battery.
Oh,
Well, maybe we could, if
We
you're
can still
interested in
have
that,
some, yeah.
in the live, ask and we can post, just on the internet.
Well, I think you could do it quickly. What do you use?
Well, it's eclectic. I use Veritas Press for my history and literature. I use IEW, which covers history and writing. I use Saxon Math. I have used Shirley English for grammar, although I would say that their approach to essay writing or learning to essay write is really soul deadening. And so we didn't do that part
Soul
of
deadening.
that part of the curriculum. And
But the songs, a preposition is,
it
especially.
is so catchy, and we actually stopped using their version of it and we made our own because of the rhyming was so fun, and we were stomping and rapping and clapping, so it was awesome. So yeah,
So combination.
yes. I use Memoria Press, Matthew C. from Math. There's also IEW in there. I fell in love with it because the K through second extracurriculum. There's a read aloud for the week, and it's kind of like, I guess, a unit study. It's themed. So we also talk about a work of art, a poem, music, and I usually combine those over poetry and tea. And then there's also a science and history that goes with the book. And then for the older kids, I really liked it for the literature studies. Like, we're reading Little House on the Prairie and Little Women, and just like studying them and learning about history and science through that. And then we also do exploring nature with children, usually with Amber.
yeah. I forgot about free, wild and free that we do with Sarah, but we also do Apologia for science. Now that the kids are in high school or middle school, wherever they're in.
So we use Classical Conversations as our base, and then we use Saxon for math, IEW for writing and spelling, and grammar, but we just layered that grammar this year, so that's just my 4th grader doing that grammar, but we do first language lessons for our main grammar for everyone, and that is memorization of poetry and basic grammar, but we do a lot of memorization through that.
This probably sounds so overwhelming.
Like, I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But this is not day one for any of us.
No.
We also do a lot of devotion time at our house in the mornings. That's our first thing that we do. And so if you're interested in any of the devotions that we do, I have a list here. Don't want to go through all of it because it would be overwhelming. That's it. But for IEW, for the writing, we use structure and style. For students, they also have history-based studies as well.
Our base is classical conversations. I supplement math and English language arts with the good and the beautiful. I also use their history sometimes to supplement with the kids. I use their unit studies, and I use their extracurricular studies. So like Hattie's doing typing. I use their handwriting. I use master books for a Bible curriculum, and I use the good and the beautiful. I don't know if I said that for unit studies. Sometimes Wild and Free for unit studies, and then Exploring Nature with Children for unit studies.
I forgot one of my kids' favorites.
What?
We love Story of the World.
Oh yeah, yes. It's a supplement.
It's kind of an
Everybody's using that now.
It's a kind of an extra, but my kids are obsessed with it. They read it. We listen to the audiobook. We do the quizzes and the color sheets.
It's classical. It's history.
It's classical history, and they love it. And our handwriting also, we use a reason for handwriting. We just started that, but the kids work up to writing scripture each week, and so we also use that for memory, scripture memory.
Oh, wow. I am not going to overwhelm you with what we use.
So many different ages.
There's 5 of them. I mean, I would say the good and the beautiful, the mystery of history we use.
Is that master books?
No.
Just in
Idea
standalone.
Press. Yeah.
Okay.
Apology of Science, and our own other things.
Eclectic.
Yeah, those would be the main ones. And Saxon Math. That's just tried and true.
Especially with boys.
Master
probably.
books. Yeah.
Like math. So the good and the beautiful is a living math, which I find is good for like a girl who wants like very decorated.
I know I have all boys, so Saxon, it's black and white. It's to the point.
Lines.
But I know that some of my friends who have girls prefer to do a Becca because it's more colorful at those younger ages.
Okay, what's our last question before the phone dies and we lose this recording?
Well, the phone died. But Lauren wants to know if she could go to your pool, and I just said I assume jurisdiction, yes, enjoy.
Okay, well that sounds good. Well, thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Lydia.
And good
We
luck
believe
to all
in you.
of you.
We
You
believe
got
in
this.
you.